I think we can get rolling. What do you say? Let's do this thing. Nice to meet everybody. This is my first time at Northwest Met. This is also my first time doing a solo presentation, so, you know, a lot of firsts today. So thank you all for having me. My name's Andy Bortz. I am just about 1 year into my job at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, literally a stone's throw away from here. And my role is the Instructional Technology Support Specialist. So I oversee lecture capture, web conferencing, and also student response systems. So nice little plate to have, but it's also nice to have a little bit of focus. But for today, we're going to hone in on the lecture capture portion of what I do on a day-to-day basis. So today's presentation is called Reframing Lecture Capture Implementation, and we'll show you why, momentarily, why the title is called reframing. Sounds like a really easy term, but there's a lot involved behind it. So first of all, just so you know that I'm not some goofball walking in off the street talking to you about this sort of thing, I have a bachelor's degree from Westminster College, which is in a teeny-weeny 1 square mile part of town in a little place called New Wilmington, Pennsylvania, about an hour and a half north of Pittsburgh. So I have my bachelor's degree from there in broadcasting and a minor in Spanish as well. And I was also the Classroom and Event Technology Specialist at Westminster from 2010 to 2018. So I oversaw all classroom technology and all event support, which if you've done one or the other, you know that's pretty tedious. I am also, just like I said, about a year into my current position, and my master's degree in education is going to be in my hands in 24 days. So thank you. But the focus for the master's degree for me was in education with a counseling track, and I'm also a proud member of the American School Counselor Association, so I get a lot of neat resources about, you know, how the organization performs and how you can use those skills beyond just having a student come into a counselor center and say, here's what I'm going through. So I wanted to try and tie the two together, because I figured if I'm going to get a master's in something that's a little bit different from what I actually got my bachelor's in, there's got to be a way to make the hands shake. And so I looked at the model for the American School Counselors Association, and if you take a look at some of the terminology on it, a lot of it actually ties into faculty support along with how a project gets off the ground. Things like advocacy, accountability, management, leadership, systemic change. There's a bunch of factors in there that actually tie into technology, especially in the educational realm. So the thought process behind this topic for this presentation is, how do we adjust the mindset of an instructor who may come into the office, if you had a couch there, lay on that couch and say, I just don't feel like lecture capture is going to do any good at all. How do we change that? You know, we're all excited about technology, but how do we get them excited about it? So understanding what we went through as an institution, we wanted to pursue lecture capture, and this was prior to when I arrived. So I wasn't involved in all of the discussions, but I heard a lot of details about what we were looking for and how we could accommodate it on our campus. And then, of course, you have to have the people and the resources to be able to support it. And lo and behold, here I am in Sin City. And then when it came to pitching it to the faculty, you know, obviously, as I said, there's going to be some folks who may not be that interested in using it just because they're not fully aware of its power. So the keys here were to figure out how to develop that excitement framework. What could we do to instill that? And then a couple of other key points for this whole thing were communication, support, and then of course you want to know what the product's doing and how it's being used. So all of that ties together, and each one of those points has a tie-in to the American School Counselors Association model of how you provide good service. So that's where this whole thing kind of comes full circle. So as we initially started to roll it out, here's what we were thinking on the blueprint scale from our Office of Information Technology. And these were the preliminary discussions even before I was hired. We wanted to make sure that we knew what lecture capture could do, and I put in a humble way. We are all geeky in our own way about these really neat features that's on the administrative side of the software. Does it matter to the faculty? It might. I won't say that it doesn't, but if we know what its basic principle is, that drives home how you can market it to faculty. We also thought, let's take the spaces that have the most people and try it there first. We figure that'll be the highest impact, so that maybe the instructors who get 50 people banging on their doors saying, I can't remember what you said yesterday, point them back to the video, see what you get. And then highlight the features for faculty and see if they use the system. When I say see if they use the system, I'm not just saying it's there, try it. We actually let them know that it's there and give them a little prequel, almost like a preview of coming attractions, if you will, so that they can see that a room is equipped and be able to get a chance to play with it. And then the other thought was market as lecture capture. And here's where you're going to start to see the reframing come into play, because this was an initial concept, but you'll be shocked at what happens when you market it in a slightly different way. So we have this cool blueprint from our office because we're all geeks. We know people are going to get excited about it. We have a mindset that this is a tool that's going to be used. And then you go to the faculty, and here's what you get. Why? It's a lot of work. What am I going to do with it? I don't have any control over anything. Why am I going to press a button and be at the mercy of a piece of technology? And my favorite one, I'm going to be teaching in an empty room. That's where the reframing comes into play. This is kind of the reason why I wish I could get a couch in my office, because I hear this a lot, even from folks I don't work with, and even from where I used to work. There was a little bit of apprehension to want to try to do this. So let's take it from the counseling brain. Let's think about it as if we were going to help this person figure out the benefits of it. So what is reframing? The American School Counselors Association definition of it is a technique used in therapy to help create a different way of looking at a situation, person, or relationship by changing its meaning. So how do we get the faculty to think, I'm not going to think something other than I'm not teaching to students anymore, I'm teaching to air? How do we do that? We take a different perspective, a different angle at it. And you'll see that we have multiple angles we can take. We have angles from self-benefit, we have angles from what the student gets out of it. So here's my favorite analogy. I'm a golfer. So I've known people that I've golfed with who hit 300-yard drives and they want to snap their club in half because they hit the ball into this stuff. I can still see 3/4 of the ball. I'm pretty happy. Think about it. You could be here, or my favorite, you could be there. So when you reframe it, it's not as bad as it sounds, right? You could be having to get out some climbing shoes to go up into the middle of a tree. That has happened, not to me, but I have seen that happen before. So as we go to the next step, we take that old context of what people were honestly looking at lecture capture as. We say, this isn't a block. This isn't something that can be an interruption or a negative or an enemy even. You know, some people abhor lecture capture. But we can change that to say that it's a useful tool, it's interesting, and it's even a lesson for you. Because one of the things I've learned being in higher ed, even in the positions that we're in, we never stop learning. Nobody should ever stop learning. And I think that's a huge tone setter, especially when it comes to faculty and students. So when we go to the next part of it, we talk about what do we do to let the faculty's approaches reframe. As a counselor, one of the things that we learn really early on is it's really good to have good ears. And as Joe mentioned in his keynote, getting out to faculty and actually listening to what they have to say opens so many doors. When I started working at UNLV, the first question I had during my interview process was, I came from a small school, had about 100 faculty. What's going to be the difference that I noticed between working at a smaller school and a bit larger school? And one of the responses was, you're going to slightly lose some of that intimacy with faculty. I've made it a mission not to. And so Opening up the door, saying the quote-unquote doctor is in, has really unleashed some power for what lecture capture can do and the mindset toward it. So let's take some of those concerns, or couch moments I like to call them, that we had, and let's take it down a different avenue. I don't see the value of recording my lectures. What are your students going to see? That's the mission, right? We are educating students. So think about it from that perspective. If you're a student and you're sitting in that room and maybe you had a rough day or something happened, what if you want to go back and just refresh that material? What if you're studying for a big exam and you don't want to go bang on the teacher's door when office hours are in session? What if that line of 50 people in the office is starting to form? This is a good way to give them an opportunity to review something on their own time, because you may have explained it really well, but they need a chance to just rehash it. Sometimes we all need a little refresher, believe me. And then, what about self-benefit? What if you do a lecture and you absolutely nail it? You nail it to the point where you pitch it to a conference of something you covered, and all of a sudden they're like, we want you to be our keynote. You have evidence that you nailed it. So you take it in those two directions, and then it doesn't seem so bad. Now, of course, there are a lot of other pieces that have to be involved with it, which you'll see coming up here. Sounds like a lot of work, okay? That's the one major caveat that I have heard about lecture capture. People say, sounds like I'm going to be investing all of my time in it, and it's time that I don't have. So this is where we start to have them think a little bit more. What if it was integrated in a classroom or worked with the LMS? Well, by golly, it does. So we're a Panopto campus, in case you were curious. And we also use Canvas as our learning management system. Our systems work hand in hand, like hand in glove. They've been flawless ever since we started working with them. So that's really helped a lot of faculty get excited about using it, because now they're not going to an external tool. They're doing everything right from within the system. And then I like to think about return on investment. Now again, if I'm saying this to an instructor, I'm letting them do the thinking. I'm not putting words in their mouths, but some of the things here are actually responses that they had whenever I would do a one-on-one with them. So things like actual lectures can be reviewed for exams. And then, of course, as I mentioned, filing in line outside of the office hours. Even something like, some students are watching TV like Netflix, and some people like to have the captions on. Well, we have an automated captioning feature in Panopto, and sometimes it's fascinating to have them just go back and be able to read everything in a transcript and be able to get that knowledge logged that way as well. So a lot of benefits from the student angle. And of course, one of the other things that I don't necessarily pitch, but is kind of one of the commonalities nowadays, is that when students see this at other places, it's not necessarily viewed as a luxury, it's expected. So expectations also drive a lot of what we talk about here. So as we go to the next topic, something that doesn't allow me any control of my content. I'm not sure what kind of systems folks are exposed to, but for this instance, we like to ask, what control do you feel like you're vacating? And most of the answers we get, we can flip around and say, actually, you're not vacating that control. Things like, how do I know when my video is going to be deleted? How do I know that I can restrict it between a certain time frame? How do I know who watched it? Am I just putting it out there and I have no idea what's going to happen with it? Those are the kinds of concerns that were brought up based on asking that question. So it was a good question because it got them to think and then allowed us to come in and help them reframe. I've been to counseling sessions quite a bit, actually, mainly because as a counselor, you're always advised to get your own counseling, because sometimes you hear a lot of things that can be very distressing and it could get you down. I've had the floor for all of those sessions, which has been great. Because by having the floor, I feel like I can get my thoughts out, I feel like somebody's listening, and I feel like that's the best assistance I can get. So apply that to how you help your faculty, and apply that to how they take something that they may have conceived as a negative and turn it into a positive for themselves and the folks who they are helping as well. No one will show up to my class anymore. This is my favorite, because honestly, I grew up in an era where nothing could ever substitute the in-class experience, because I always had a lot of folks who made their courses interactive in some way. We were using response systems. There were very few classes I took at Westminster as a broadcaster where we were sitting and reading a book, or sitting and talking about what we've read in the book. I did a lot of field work. I was out in the field filming and a lot of things like that. So I understand sometimes when the same thing happens over and over again, it might get a little tedious. And then we think about it in these angles. I like to think of it as a supplemental review tool, not a substitute for that in-class experience. The supplemental piece is the thumbs up, because that really helps them understand that they are not using it as the end-all be-all for the class. And you know what? Sometimes technology fails. It happens. So are they really willing to risk that that technology is going to be on 24/7, 365? What if somebody accidentally hits the stop button during class? Now the whole thing's gone. So it's kind of hard to say that it's an issue where people are not going to show up to class anymore. You know, there's lots of factors at play that can actually make it a more negative experience if that happens. And then I also like to say, you know, you're passionate about this, aren't you? Because they want to see students in the classroom. You know, that's what makes the experience two-way. So I like to make them aware of the fact that what they're saying is indeed very passionate. So that's a really cool way to reframe that as well. And then my favorite, what kind of college experience do your students expect? You know, put yourself in their shoes. If they're paying big bucks to go to campus, they want to have something that they're going to remember. So, you know, some folks may love a more interactive class. Some people may want to have that opportunity to review on demand. So you have to think about it from that perspective. Okay? And then how can you create appeal in the classroom? Maybe there's something that, you know, you can add to the fix to make sure that there is a little more interactivity and that you get some more group projects. I have not met one instructor yet who has told me that it is impossible to do something collaborative or interactive in their class, regardless of what field it is in. And that's the attitude that should be had. You know, anything is possible. So let's talk about how we actually made this reframing come into a bit more of a reality from multiple angles. First of all, we like to make sure that the instructors can see what the student sees, even before actually showing them how to use the product. You would be shocked at how many instructors were excited about the fact that students could take their own notes within the video. Students could make their own bookmarks. Students could toggle the captioning. Students could make one angle bigger than the other. Students could go through any point in the timeline. They could take quizzes to gauge their knowledge. We opened up so many doors by just demonstrating it from what the student sees first before actually taking it to the other angle and saying, now here's how you use it. It's really powerful when they can see what the benefit is right out of the gate. And then I like to call this the flipped classroom concept. We've all heard about flipped classrooms, I'm sure. But when it comes to lecture capture, the first thing I would think of if I heard lecture capture is I have to stand in a classroom, there's a camera in the back, there's audio that I have to wear, whether it's a mic or some kind of boundary microphone, and I have to do it live in front of everybody, and then what I get is what I get. So what we do is we like to put them in front of the camera first in a place that's a little more inconspicuous, i.e. their office. So what we do is with Panopto, we say, try doing some recordings from your office so you can get used to checking your camera, checking your levels, and doing that sort of, you know, little checking before you get going. And that instills the confidence to use the tool, because then you're taking it from one application to another, and then you get to see both use cases, right? So starting small really helps. And then when it comes to marketing as well, think about this. We talked about what the common connotation is for lecture capture. we started to really sell this as more of a content management tool. Do you remember one of the concerns talking about, I feel like I'm giving up control? Content management completely takes a 180 on that, doesn't it? It actually lets you think, okay, now I actually do have some control with what I'm recording. So that's one of the big reframes that we were able to do. And then, of course, from the marketing standpoint, statistical analysis. What's happening with these videos that are being created? Who's watching them? How long are they? Do you notice people in a 30-minute video are starting to taper off at the 10-minute mark, and then all of a sudden, at the 12-minute mark, the peak comes back up? Maybe there's a concept that you covered that people are very interested in. So see, all of these things are starting to power the locomotive, right? I don't know why I'm doing this. But I'm into this, I'm sorry. But you can see we've got some motion here, and you'll notice later on here in this presentation that we actually show the motion coming to life in a statistical form. So as we go on, notice this is just from this spring, but this is showing one of the courses where we show some viewer engagement based on, you know, how often somebody watched something, along with how many minutes they watched it and how many unique viewers there were. Notice in the spring, you know, we started off kind of slow because, of course, it was, you know, winter break. But then as we go into the middle part of February, as we head toward, you know, the part of the time when midterms begin to creep in, notice that the viewership actually goes up. So we're noticing in one class that when the word gets out there and the functionality is really conveyed, it starts to pick up the power. And then down on the bottom, you can see viewer engagement talks about you know, where people in the video actually are interacting with it, whether it's taking notes or making bookmarks. And you know, again, we're just 1 year into using Panopto, so we're you know, using this as kind of our pilot year. But notice that once people figure it out, they're able to actually interact with it. So it's really a neat way to see it come to life when we're reframing a faculty member's approach to it. So then that leads us to training. How can we use training to help reframing here? We show the non-overwhelming features. This is where the humble part of learning the tool comes into play. Things like, how do you do a basic edit? How do you publish the video? How do you caption it? If you want your video to be recorded on the first week and you only want it to be available during week 7, how do you make that happen? We show them the very basics to get them excited about the common features that we know are interesting, based on their feedback or based on research we've done at other institutions. And then, of course, the start in the office, then move to the classroom. This is where we really like to have them focus on clean audio and video. And notice that I underlined audio. That's the heartbeat of the whole experience. If there's no audio, it ruins the whole experience, right? That's not a technical error, by the way. So whenever we start to market this and help to train people, we always tell them, when it comes to lecture capture, garbage in equals garbage out. And that's what I heard in my broadcasting courses all the time. If your video was out of focus, you could not correct that in an editor. So do some short snippets and focus on really making sure that your audio levels are clean and that you have good-looking video. Okay? I can't tell you how many times I've had people thank us for telling them something like making sure to not have a bright sunlight behind them whenever they're recording, because then they turn into a shadow. Or even just this tip, if somebody's wearing a lavalier microphone, I just learned this a couple of months ago. If you put your thumb on your chin and you put your pinky down with a stretch like this, that's about the point where you want to put the lav. I mean, little things like that, and then it seems like clockwork for them. They remember that, and I see a lot of people do this before they put the mic on, so it gets a little comical, but it's still something they remember, and it starts to get into a routine. So then when it comes to the in-classroom experience for this, we said from our end, let's make it as automated as possible, because automation tends to rule. I worked in radio for about 10 years, and we always loved our automation mode because it automatically played everything. We didn't have to have somebody fire off the reels for every song we played. So what we do kind of sounds like lights, camera, action. One of our favorite tools to let faculty know about is mics, camera, capture. And that's what we line our touch panels with. We're also a Crestron house. So we have Crestron touch panels and DMPS 300 processors. We can get really geeky in the tech world if you want to. But we also sell it as an opportunity for the students to take that lecture and be able to go anywhere in that lecture and review that content whenever they need to. Okay? So when you look in the classroom, these are some of our interfaces for what we actually program. And the cool part about it is, when it comes to the microphone itself, there are status indicators right there that let you know that that mic is ready to go. Okay? And there's even a meter there to let you see what your levels look like. If that battery were for some reason at half charge or no charge, it would let you know. And it would also let you know whether or not you're muted. So that's really something that just takes away from the extra, cherry picking, if you will, to try and make sure everything's set to go. That does it for us. And then even when it comes to control, we give them some camera control in rooms that do not have a tracking camera. We use Vadio cameras for our tracking systems. But you can see that in the rooms that do not have tracking systems, they can go up, down, left, right. They can zoom in and out. They can even customize their own view if they want to. We just give them a little tutorial on how to do it. But if they would rather have the camera point at somewhere else, we can have them do that. And then on the bottom here, there's their insurance to let them know they're recording. So it lets you see what recording is going on, how long it's going to be, and then it even gives you the option to extend it or pause it, or stop it even, if you wanted to. So a lot of cool features about that. So as we look at the results of this, the biggest thing that we took away from it was that the comfort levels that faculty established were mainly twofold. First of all, the workflow for doing the actual lecture capture was something that just came to them like clockwork, primarily because it shakes hands with our LMS. So imagine just going into the course, clicking one button, and you're off and running. That was the goal all along, and lo and behold, there it was. And then the other workflow that they established was being on camera. It's amazing what happens when a camera gets in front of your face when you're doing a speech or you're doing any kind of lecture. People clam up because now somebody's watching or something is watching. The way I look at it is you've got a bunch of people in your classroom watching you too. So it doesn't necessarily, like from my angle, add pressure, but it does, kind of have you hone your skills in a little bit about being on camera and making sure your audio is good. So that if one day you wanted to go to a conference or you wanted to do a major lecture on campus, you actually have the wherewithal to know where your microphone should go, and you can impress a lot of people. So it's the benefits just keep rolling in, and that's what we try to let the faculty know. And then content management works so much better as a marketing tool than lecture capture because the flexibility and control that they get is implied in the fact that it's content management. We have not had anybody yet, if I could find some wood I would, knock on it, but we've not had anybody yet who has said anything about the flow being complicated or the flow being, raunchy every once in a while. Fortunately, we had a good pilot program over the summer to really break it in and find out where the tweaks needed to be. And then for future development, we took the feedback that was given to us by our instructors and faculty, and we're going to start to come up with some additional training classes that cover some more of those advanced features. And then things like, what do the control systems need to do to be able to accommodate faculty better? One thing we noticed, we have 2 buttons on our touch panel that actually are pointing to the same function, just worded differently. One button says record now and the other one says start. So one day, something's going to give. So we're going to be ahead of that and we're going to adjust it. And then feature requests. It's amazing how many faculty have said something like, I wish Panopto did this. That's where we come in and we either say, here's how it works, or we make a feature request to the team. And it's been great to work with them because they've always taken our feature requests to heart. So a lot of the faculty are very sincere about what they want to. So one of the things I wanted to show here was spring versus fall content creation based on the fact that we started to reframe this. So if you notice, in the fall, we had about 250 created hours of content. The spring data was taken as of March 1st, and we had almost 400 hours of content created. Now, I wanted to illustrate that because we're not done yet. Spring semester is still on, and there are still people creating content. So that number is growing at a pretty good clip, all because we've taken the approach with faculty to say, here's what it can do. Just give it a shot. Give it a shot and see what it's all about. And then this is probably the tell-all of the whole thing. When in the fall, we had about 5,000-ish viewers of content. In other words, that's how many people actually went on and actually watched something, whether it was a training video or a class video, anything like that. Look at what that number has done as of March 25th. That number has gone almost up to the point where it's going to double by the time we hit the end of the year. What a great start. I mean, you know, the crew has done a great job of making the automation process easy, but once you get the faculty in that mindset that it's not as bad as it seems, look at what happens. So the next step is we're going to start to get some student feedback and make sure that when they watch the videos, everything is all hunky-dory. So then, what does that mean for the future? One of the things we heavily discussed was getting our Office of Information Technology out a little bit more onto campus. And I loved that concept because, like I said, I came from a smaller campus. So that's all we did. We went out to people. We said, here's what's coming. Here's what we have. Help us. Give us a shot and let us help you. What can we do for you? So we actually did some expo presentations this year, and you know, we were able to get a lot of momentum from that. And then the dedicated training sessions and lunch and learns, we started this in the fall, and we really started to sell the reframing of this in the fall. But now that we have more people using it, we're going to have more people who are curious about additional features and functions that pertain to it. And then we also are thinking of putting together monthly reminders about various products that we have, not just lecture capture, but something like a did you know you could do this? Something whimsical, something fun, but something short. Something that you could dedicate a minute or two to just go and look and see what it's all about. And then working with the open labs for our LMS, I think, is huge, because there have been times where we've been called into some open labs because there have been some instructors interested in content management and lecture capture. And so they pop in and they say, you know, can you help us? You know, I'm in open lab. So that's where we can start to shake hands with our folks who, you know, run our LMS and get that ball rolling too. So that pretty much ends my spiel. You've endured one counseling session, essentially, with Sir Bortz here. But I'm opening the floor up to you. I'm all ears. Do you have any questions at all about what we've done, how reframing works, or anything along that line? So that's a great question, because we started out primarily in classrooms. We have about 20-ish, 22 I think officially, that are online with like full-blown appliances and the full-blown system. But I also know our library is under some renovations right now and getting some studios in there. So originally we were having conversations about how could we make Panopto work in those areas, you know, kind of like integrating with almost a one-button touch. So that is coming. But for now, what we've primarily done is we've primarily sold it as a classroom tool, and we've also said, here's a webcam you can use, here's a microphone you can use, and ideally that's how you get your feet wet with it. So that's what we've really done. And honestly, most people from the classroom side are still, you know, recording their lectures every time they teach in there. I did have one instructor who, he likes to be colorful in his class, and so he didn't want to have to keep editing out the points of the lecture where he was colorful. So he just started doing some supplemental recordings in his class. I know. I almost was tempted to go and see what exactly colorful meant, but having interacted with him, he's a great guy, but I could tell how colorful would enter his vocabulary. But but you know, most of the students in that class, it was a hospitality course, and most of the students in there were going back and watching the content. So, you know, he sold it to his students though. He explained based on the reframing we did with him how much it would benefit to be able to go back and see that content. Ezra.
Yeah, no, and I find that selling or controlling the message is a huge selling point for instructors. I have to tell you stories about my nursing professor. But a question I have is, have you encountered any sort of faculty resistance based on privacy concerns?
Well, as far as privacy concerns are, well, let's not knock over the podium first. We have, you know, at points, faculty have said, you know, what's going to happen when I put my content there? Because we tell them about how it works with the learning management software. So one of the things that we tell them right up front is when you use the learning management software, that content is only available to any students who are enrolled in the course. And this is kind of where part of the reframing came in as well, because we would actually demonstrate to them from a test course what would happen if, for example, I tried to forward content to my student worker who was not in the course. And he'd get a major error that said, you cannot watch this content, you need to request permission to access this content, or something to that scale. So when we've met the faculty resistance from that angle, that's where we've started to kind of employ the reframing a bit, because it's something that's looked at as a negative, but we tell them what it does to turn it into a positive. So the light bulb goes off and it brings it to life for them.
You know, on a really deeper level than that, you know, about Panopto and ownership of data, this is something I've encountered campus-wide a huge amount of resistance to. We're Google campus, so YouTube, and faculty are largely resistant to putting airlines on YouTube, even if you make them unlisted or private, because Google owns that data. Google, and it says in terms of this, Google can do what they please with that data, that they can retain it, you can actually read it. And to some of our more, I don't know if a better word is paranoid, but some of our paranoid faculty, this is a huge, you know, bad accident. Have you encountered similar sorts of issues, and have you been able to do around using this content?
We have, and honestly, the fun part about, you know, introducing this was actually one of the slides I did in one of the presentations talked about the difference between Panopto and YouTube from that standpoint, because that content on YouTube is no longer owned by you. So actually, it's a funny story. One of the things that came up when I watched a lecture capture presentation a few years ago was a concept where an instructor uploaded a video to YouTube that talked about the benefits of getting vaccinated. Once that video goes to YouTube, there are a bunch of algorithms that are calculated to figure out where that video would make the most sense. Whenever that takes over, sometimes the results are unintended. So it was an odd situation when that same video was right next to a video that said, here's why vaccines are the death of you. Oops. So the nice part about Panopto is the course owns the content. You upload the content to the course, and then the course populates all of that content together and doesn't let it get out to any of the other videos that have been populated in that cloud. So that's how we have countered that resistance. We've actually let them know that once that content is posted, that content is there to stay and is not going to be at the mercy of somebody owning it. And even the Panopto folks at their last conference said, that content is all yours. Wherever it is in that Panopto cloud, we don't touch it, we don't put it under any algorithms, it's yours. So that's how we've countered that. Did that answer your question? I rambled like crazy, so go ahead. Oh. Sure. So what we've done recently is we actually met with our accessibility team and our DRC, and we were able to kind of get the parameters of when things needed to be captioned, when things should be captioned, and preparing to caption. So in a nutshell, what we were told was if you are putting video into a course and there is no request for accommodation, as long as that video is only used in that course, that video is good. If you plan to use video down the line that you recorded for a non-accommodation class, plan to caption. So that's kind of a very loose term, plan to caption. So what we're doing right now, honestly, for instructors is we tell them, if you want a free, quick way to caption, Panopto has an automated speech recognition feature. We show them how to go into the editor and put those in automatically. It's about 80 to 85% accurate though, so there is some touch-ups that have to be done. However, there is also a third-party group that we work with that we can send content out to. The concern right now is who funds it. So that's where the other conversations are coming into play as we approach the summertime here. You got it. Exactly. Yes, they do have the ability to be able to do that. Right. Hey. Well, that's a great question. So what we're doing, honestly, since I'm an administrator of Panopto, which is like, that was the first thing I was ever a major administrator for, so my heart ticks a little bit quicker when I say that. But what we did was we actually set up our training videos to be in their own folder, and then we posted a public link on our Panopto website so that people could click on it and be taken directly to that folder within Panopto itself. So we haven't actually made a course in Canvas to provide the training, but we've made a folder that has all of those videos housed so that they could only be accessible by UNLV personnel. And that's why we wanted to do that, because it would have been kind of tricky to enroll everybody at UNLV into one course. So instead what we did was we just took that approach and just made a public link to the folder with all that content. So does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Cool. Anybody else? Go ahead. Well, there's a couple of pieces to that. The first piece is, from the flipped classroom end, we do show instructors how to disable the video portion, primarily because sometimes they say they have a bad hair day and they just don't want to see themselves on camera. But a lot of studies have actually shown that when you have your talking head on the video accommodating your content, it makes it feel like the student is much more engaged, because like even here, I've been doing, motions and things like that, and you would have missed my locomotive action. But one of the things that we help faculty reframe from that element is the fact that it does kind of help with the interactivity, because they feel like they can actually see what you look like, they can see you speaking, they can see your hand motions. If you emphasize something, it's a lot easier to see them emphasize it than to wonder what they're emphasizing, because you can't necessarily see any of that. But in the rooms themselves, all the cameras are active. They can't be disabled. And that's primarily from a technical standpoint. We want to make sure there is a camera feed going. But we always try to let the faculty know that if they can show their face, it usually provides the best benefit as far as making it a more intimate experience. So hopefully that helps, because that's the primary goal of this, is to help faculty understand that things can be understood from a different element. The key, though, is to let them figure it out based on the questions you ask. So you're not trying to brainwash, you're just trying to help them get that mindset, right? And that's like the counseling sessions I've been to, self-realization. That helps so much. Any other questions?